Hi guys! In today's video, I want to do a tier ranking of the Wheel of Time books. I've finally read them all. I've read New Spring as well because that was the only book that I had left. And now I feel adequate enough, I feel prepared to actually do a tier ranking of all of the books. A little warning before I get into this, I'm going to not be spoiling anything, but I might at some point say a name or something and you might be able to deduce something, but I'll try to keep it as spoiler free as possible and try not to say anything about any of the characters. Just my overall thoughts and why I chose a book to be in a certain place. And also, just because I'll be putting one of the books or two of the books or whatever in a lower ranking doesn't mean I don't like it. It just means that I am forcing myself to not put everything in S tier or A tier. So this is my little warning before we get into it. I'm keeping it as spoiler free as humanly possible. So let's get into it. The first book that I will be ranking is The Eye of the World. And after I finished The Wheel of Time and I started reading other series such as First Law or The Witcher, I find it very common to struggle with the first book, which wasn't the problem with The Wheel of Time. The Eye of the World does an amazing job setting up the characters, setting up the world, setting up the atmosphere, the plot of the story. I just loved the coziness of The Eye of the World. I loved seeing the characters for the first time, learning the intricacies of the world, and feeling how incredibly expansive the world is, and being so excited to dive deeper into this world. The only critique I have in a sense is the fact that it doesn't feel as Jordan-esque as the other books feel. You can see from The Great Hunt that Jordan is more comfortable in his writing or in this world that he's building for us. For that reason alone, the Eye of the World will be in the A tier because it still isn't as Jordan-esque in the atmosphere and the feeling in the characters as the other books are. Now we have The Great Hunt, the second book in the series, and I love it. Like, that's the book when I was like, okay, this is how we're going to roll. Because in The Eye of the World, I felt like I would know how the plot would progress in the whole series because I was just that naive. Apparently, it's just amazing to see the people you've met in the first book. I'm trying not to say any of the names, but the people you've met in the first book become less naive and getting used to the world around them, seeing their surroundings, learning about how other people's work, customs, and everything, and see them become more comfortable and accepting of their journey and the thing that they are meant to be doing, because it's a lot. Like being Dragon Reborn or being Tavern or being made to save the world or break it is something that I love that in this book is not presented lightly. I love the struggle, the inner struggle to admit to yourself that you are the hero that this world needs, and how they battle with understanding and accepting the situation they're put in. Also, let us not forget that The Great Hunt has one of the best endings of the whole series, in my opinion, has one of the best endings. And it's the first time you witness how Robert Jordan lulls you into the story from the beginning and then slowly builds up the tension and builds it until the ending, which is an amazing climax to the story. And it's just your first glimpse of how amazing Robert Jordan is as a writer. And I love the characters, I love the plot, I love the pacing, I love the way we are introduced to the world. I love how expansive the world feels in this book, and how you, for the first time, for me especially, this book was the first time where I was like, yeah, I stumbled onto gold, and I stumbled onto something that I know I will never forget, and I'm excited to see where the story goes. So that, for that reason, The Great Hunt is an S tier for me, because it feels like Wheel of Time. Like, it really feels like Wheel of Time, and I just love the ending. Like, I really love the ending to the story. So yeah, it's S tier. Now moving on to the next book, which is The Dragon Reborn. After the ending of The Great Hunt, our characters are basically scattered throughout the map, just as they've been in The Great Hunt. And I love that we get to see them mature. We get to see them take responsibility of what they have to do, and it's not necessarily that they're like, oh, I'm so sad, but we get to see a sadder side to them, because it's not a fun job. It's not a fun thing to carry on your shoulders. And I loved Rand in the book. I loved the decision that he took, and how his story ends in this book is just amazing. That's the first moment I cried at the ending of this book. It's just striking to see these characters, because I know it's a 15 book series, but still you've already read 2 books that are like 100 pages long, so you are attached to the characters. And the moment that the end of The Dragon Reborn brought tears to my eyes, my mom just recently finished it on her first read, and she cried as well. So it's an amazing moment for the character, and to get to see them, remember them as they were, and see them then, it's just great. And I love the plot of the story, and how this is just what stuns me, that Robert Jordan really has his characters scattered, and just see them how they're webbed in this world, but how they come together at the end. I just love that we always get these references of the pattern, and how you influence the pattern, or that you are in the pattern, and it just guides you through it. And I love that these characters are so interweaved, and their destinies are so intertwined in this great pattern, and how they begin and always end in this amazing climax. And all the little things that are happening throughout the book, and are scattered, all these clues and little things that happen, just pay off so well at the end of the book. I really loved Matt in the story. I loved Matt from the get-go, like from the first book. He is one of the characters that I like most, and I empathize with the most. And I feel like in this book, even though from the first book we get to see glimpses of him being very caring, and even though he goes like through a lot, you can still see how selfless he is, even at his worst. But in this book, he just shines. Like, at the ending of the book, he is just amazing. He is still the funny guy, the guy that makes everyone laugh, and the guy that cares for everyone, the guy with the golden heart. But he's just amazing. Like, I loved this ending so much for him, because it just shows the core essence of Matt, and how he is willing to do anything for the people that he cares about. The only thing that I have to say is that I felt a bit like, oh, we're traveling from this part to this part, now we're going from this part to this part, and it felt a bit repetitive in that sense. Yeah, for Dragon Reborn will definitely be in the A tier. I really like it, but I feel so bad not placing all of them in the S tier, but A tier. Okay, now let's get to the 4th book, which is The Shadow Rising. And this is one of my favorite books of the series, and obviously it's in the S tier. I'm not going to be, in which tier I'm going to place it, because it's obvious it's in the S tier. I mean, everybody knows how good of a book Shadow Rising is. It's absolutely amazing, because you kind of understand how the world works by now, like how everything goes, even if there are a lot of places that you haven't explored yet. You kind of are familiar with the feeling of the Wheel of Time, but in Shadow Rising you explore something completely different. Like, it's absolutely new to you, and it's new to the characters. It's very different. I absolutely love the atmosphere and the uncertainty of the whole thing that the main characters go through in this book. And this book really showcases how great the world building in the series is, and how expansive it is, and how Robert Jordan really understands what is very important when making a culture of a people, and how he is very able to create it so distinctly from all the others that he already presented in the series thus far. And I just read a snippet from the book yesterday, and it made me emotional again because it's just so good. And the foreshadowing in this book is insane. Like, if you've already read the series and you go back to it, it just showcases how great of a series this is. And the atmosphere is changed from the other books, and it feels like a new book. It feels very unfamiliar and very intriguing and very mysterious and very scary and dangerous, and it's just great. Like, it's a great book, and the ending to it is phenomenal. Like, I have only words of praise for Shadow Rising. Shadow Rising is in the S tier. It's just amazing, and I really am happy that my mom is currently reading it, so I cannot wait to see her reaction to reading this amazing book. And yeah, Shadow Rising is great, is amazing, is S tier, basically. Now we have Fires of Heaven, book 5 in the series, and it's a great it doesn't sound great when I make these faces. So coming off the high that was Shadow Rising, Fires of Heaven, I really liked it, but I was a bit of emotionally drained from Shadow Rising and all the other books so far. But I still really loved the plot of the story, and I really loved the ending, even though that's why I'm placing it in B tier. But it didn't affect me as much as I maybe should have been affected by it. But it's still great. Like, I really appreciated everything that happens in the last 200 or so pages. It just didn't do it for me, and it's weird because every single fan that I've talked to really loves the ending to Fires of Heaven, but I still really appreciate it. Like, it's not a bad book at all. I love the characters, except for one. Like, in the whole Val and Luca plotline, it was one character that constantly annoyed the hell out of me, and I'm happy that by the end of this series she became one of my favorite characters ever. But in this book, every time I saw her name at the beginning of a chapter, I was like, okay, I need to close the book, read tomorrow, or just like take a breather and then start reading the chapter, because she infuriated me. Like, she was unreasonably annoying. But I'm happy I pulled through because I understand her now. Like, I like her a lot, but it was just that little thing with her character, and the fact that I wasn't as affected by the ending as I should have been, that I'm going to be placing Fires of Heaven in the B tier. It's still an amazing book. I still really like the way the story progresses. I really like the pacing. I really like seeing how the ton of things are affecting our characters and how they are mentally evolving, how they are struggling. It's not an easy path to go on, and this book still delivers and still has great characters. It's just, it wasn't as for me personally. I feel bad. I feel really bad. I'll put all the books in the S tier if possible, but Fires of Heaven is B tier, so I have to accept it. And now moving on to the next book, we have Lord of Chaos. And this is the 6th book and the 6th book in the series, and I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved it. I loved Rand's character, like the things that are happening to him, and the way the characters are so morally gray, and so it's so interesting to see them grow. Like, this is the thing that I always say about the Wheel of Time, that it's a character-based series, even though a lot of things happen and it's very action-packed at moments. It's so interesting to see these roller coasters of, do I trust them? I don't trust them. Should I trust them? And it's super interesting because it makes the whole thing more palpable, more real. For me, Lord of Chaos caught me by surprise in a sense, because I wasn't expecting the ending to it at all, what happened. And it's a great tonal shift, and it's a great darkening of the situation. to the whole thing that happens, and I just love not necessarily love, like I don't wish that on anybody, but I loved what happens to our main characters and at the ending especially. But I just love what happens with Egwene as well, or with Rand, or everything that happens in Lord of Chaos is just amazing, and it's my favorite ending of a book in the series, excepting for like not taking into consideration a Memory of Light. But it's one of my favorite endings in the series because it caught me off guard. Like it really caught me off guard, and it's great. Like it's absolutely great. It really showcases what you should be expecting for in the rest of the series, and it blew my mind. Like it blew me away. I love the action scene, how well it was written. Like I don't hear enough people talking about how well Robert Jordan wrote battles and action scenes and everything. I just loved it, and not just referring to like two people fighting with a sword, because I love the way he describes it with like cat crossing a courtyard. I like that because I can imagine it, but I'm referring to a more general like battle scenes. Amazing, like one of the best. I haven't read as many battle scenes, but Robert Jordan's are absolutely vivid and raw and bloody, and just he does it, like really he does it for me. And Lord of Chaos really showcases this, and it's great. It's one of my favorite books in the series, and I just loved Rand's character in it. I loved Egwene's story in it, and it's just amazing. Perrin as well. So it's a great exploration of characters and plot and machinations, political machinations, and everything just goes well. And you can see where Robert is directing his story and his like little seeds that he planted throughout the books. You can sort of slowly see where they're going, and I love it. Like it's an S tier for me. Lord of Chaos will forever be one of my favorites, with Shadow Rising as well, so S tier. I'm really curious what you guys think about it, so let me know in the comments down below. So now we have the 7th book, which is A Crown of Swords, and I feel like after Lord of Chaos, this book's pacing is not as great. I feel this is like the story that starts the slog of the Wheel of Time, but I still like the plot. It's a bit slower paced, and I don't have necessarily a problem with the slog because I really appreciate what is done in those books and what is planted in those books and how it helps the end of the book and everything. So I do really appreciate that part of the series, and I think on rereads it's not so much as a bother as it was through the first read, but I feel like the pacing is a bit slower, especially coming off the high that is Lord of Chaos. For me, the pacing was a bit slower, and I like the characters, but not a lot happens. I still like very much appreciate Nynaeve's plot line and storyline, and yeah, but it wasn't just enough for me. And it's one of those books that there was a lot going on, like some things happened, but it wasn't just as great as the others. I like the ending to it, but I don't know, it just didn't hit the mark as it should have, and it's a B tier. Like I don't have criticisms of it, it's just that you can feel the slog starting in this one. Talking about the slog, next we have Path of Daggers, and so Path of Daggers is, I didn't necessarily struggle through it, and I know a lot of people say that it's included in the slog because it kind of starts in a Crown of Swords. It's just that one of the plot lines that is the most dragged in the series starts in this book, and it's just kind of boring. Like there are great moments in that storyline with that character, and I mean those characters, but it just starts in here, and there are moments that nothing really happens. The good thing that I have to say about the Path of Daggers, I really like the ending. Just per usual, it was a great ending. It was an ending that really showed how changed the characters that we came to know are, and not necessarily in a good way. I liked that development, but it's just this. Basically, it's the start of a storyline that is very dragged in the series, and I liked that storyline in most parts, but in some parts it just nothing happens, and I have flashbacks to the beginning of that storyline. So it feels like very slow paced. Like the pacing of this book is not the greatest, and the characters, not much happens in a sense, and I don't know, it's just very hard to describe. For me, Path of Daggers, Winter's Heart, and Crossroads of Twilight are all just a big book. It's just very hard for me to know one book when one book starts and one ends. But Path of Daggers is better than the two to come because it's as slow paced as the other two, but it's still C tier for me because it just, the pacing, that's what did it for me, the pacing. And it felt a bit, because he was placing so many seeds for what's to come and he was just doing so much, it felt like nothing really was happening that I was understanding so far. So on a reread, I'll probably be like, wow, this is amazing. But then I was like, what's going on? You're introducing so much to me that I don't understand. And yeah, it's a C tier. And talking about another book that I'll be placing in the C tier, which is Winter's Heart. And it's a lot of characters are introduced and a lot of political things, decisions and moves are made, but it's kind of losing me because the pacing is very slow. Not much happens necessarily, and I feel bad saying not much happens because these things have great consequences in the next books, but it just, when you first read them, you're like, okay, this is not what I'm used to. There's a lot of named characters which I'm struggling, like noble names and noble houses and characters and everything that I'm struggling to remember and keep track of, and it's absolutely impossible for me. Like, I had lists and lists of names and houses and everything, and it's just too much, and it felt very slow paced, and yeah, it was too much for me. But I still really loved the ending of Winter's Heart. It's a great conclusion to a storyline, and I love the way it was done. So even if Robert Jordan is slowing the pace a lot in these books, he always brings a great climax to the story. He always really knows how to end the book, every single book. And this book, even if it was very hard to get through in a sense, it had a great ending, and I love the characters because the characters still evolve even if they're at a much slower pace doing that. So yeah, it's a C tier. Now let's get to the next book, which is Crossroads of Twilight. It's the book that I really struggled through. Is the only book that took me 2 months to read, and it was just very hard to get through because not much happens. And this is the only book that I really agree with the people that The Wheel of Time has a slog. And it's just so many characters, so many things that just not much happens basically. And I know that probably on a reread it'll be better, but just for the fact that it's so slow paced, and it's just 1,000 pages of us sitting and brooding and being sad that, and especially in a storyline, it just makes me put Crossroads of Twilight in the D tier. And yeah, it's sad. I really tried to find a positive thing that happens in Crossroads of Twilight that makes me put it in a higher tier, but this is the only book that I'll be placing in the D tier because it's just very slow paced. Like, probably I'll enjoy it on a reread, but damn, it was hard to get through it. Like, it was difficult. And now let's get to happier things, which is Knife of Dreams. And I'm so happy that I've heard that after Crossroads of Twilight things pick up again, but I wasn't expecting them to pick up so fast and so well, but I should have trusted Robert Jordan. And Knife of Dreams is absolutely amazing. I loved one of, I'm not saying who, but I loved one of the characters' storyline and how well she is written and what she goes through and what she faces and how amazingly brave and determined and courageous and just so great. Like, and the fact that you you're reminiscing of what she was at the beginning of the series and what she's become is just great. Like, it shows you how well fleshed out these characters are, and the pacing of Knife of Dreams is astounding. It's one of the best books in the series, and I'm so happy that Robert Jordan gave us another great book, because this is unfortunately his last book in the series. It has one of the best moments in the series with Anais Sedai, and the ending was one of the endings that made me cry uncontrollably because it's so heart-wrenching, and it just shows you how well the world is built and how great these characters are and what an amazing journey you're on. And especially after Crossroads of Twilight, this book really shines. And well, my cat is insane, and it's just the feel of it, the pacing, the characters, everything is back to the Wheel of Time feel. And this book, I know it's going to sound weird, I'll be placing it in the A tier because I just love it so much, but I know I shouldn't be placing everything in the S tier. So this is going to be an A tier book, even though the ending is still one of my favorites. And I know I've said that about almost all of the books, but this one hits hard. I mean, if you've read it, you know. And yeah, it's just great. I loved seeing our characters be amazing again and do their things they do, and seeing how crazy they've gone, and everything is just it's great. I loved it. And now let's get into The Gathering Storm. This is going to be in the S tier. I love the exploration that we have of the Dragon Reborn. It's super interesting to see everything that he goes through and how he has been shaped and modeled by the things that had happened to him in the previous books, and how he decides to deal with everything. And the pacing of this story was amazing, and I really loved the action scenes in it. They were amazing. And The Gathering Storm is my favorite. Wow. Cheers, I've decided. Is my favorite ending to a book. Those lines, that chapter, Veins of Gold, makes me cry whenever I reread it. It's great. It's just I want to cry right now. But it really shows you how great these characters are. And I know I've been saying that a lot in this video, but this is what the Wheel of Time series is about. And that chapter alone just really encapsulates that feeling. And for that reason alone, and all the other reasons that I've stated about The Gathering Storm, this book is in the S tier. Like, it's just seeing the Dragon Reborn evolve and seeing him do all the things that he believes are right, or doing the mistakes that he does, and everything is just so great and heart-wrenching and entrancing, and just it's such a great story. Like, I cannot. And this book really has it all. It has characters, it has plot, it has battles, it has great pacing, it has very interesting like motives and seeds that are planted for the future books, and it's just a great Wheel of Time book, and it's in the S tier. And now, Towers of Midnight. I really liked it. I enjoyed reading it. I was very expectant to get to A Memory of Light, if I'm honest. Like, I really needed to know what happens at the end. But Towers of Midnight, it's a really good book. Like, I really enjoyed reading it. I liked the pacing and the prose, but it just felt like it was a big prologue to A Memory of Light. Like, I feel like those two books could have been like a one huge book, even though it cannot be done. It felt like it was setting everything up, leading to A Memory of Light, and it's still really well written. Like, I love a lot of what happens, and a lot of one of the tavern boys storyline is just astounding in this book, but it just felt a bit like it was just setting things up, putting things in motion for the last book. And it's going to be in the A tier because it's still great. Like, I love the pacing, I love the conclusions that our characters come to in this book, and how some of our characters' arc are basically finished in a way because they've evolved as much as they could have in these 13 books. But yeah, it feels like it was a great beginning to A Memory of Light in a sense. So it's in the A tier. And now getting to the last book of the series, which is A Memory of Light, and this is the S tier, obviously. I was very scared that after 13 books I will be underwhelmed, or I will be completely raging and throwing my book out the window when I read the ending, but no, it was amazing. I should have trusted what Robert Jordan planted and Brandon Sanderson brought to us. It was the perfect ending to the story. I'm completely satisfied with what happened to all of the characters and how the things were wrapped up. And I know some people don't like the 200-page chapter, and basically the ending to the story, like the 200-page chapter, which is basically a novel on its own. But I loved it. It's one of my favorite genre things, like a battle. It's so great. I just loved it. I devoured it. I usually don't read a lot in one sitting, but I read everything, like the 200-page chapter and the rest of like 60 pages that were left. I read it in one sitting. I cried my eyes out at the end, and seeing them from the beginning till the end and seeing what they've been through, how they evolved, how they learned to trust themselves and learned how to take responsibility of the things that they were put in and the roles that they were given to be heroes, basically. I just loved it. I love the conclusion to the story, the meaning to the story, and everything that we got to learn. A Memory of Light is in the S tier because it's my favorite ending to the series. It's just perfect. It's everything that I hoped for, is everything that I would have wanted, and it's just so satisfying to know what happens after reading this series for a year and a half. So yeah, it's great. I'm so happy to have pulled through. But this is not the last book that I'll be talking about, because I've read the sequel, but because I've read the prequel as well, which is New Spring. And it was so fun after reading all of the books and being finished with the main story to have a little nugget saved for later, basically, and having been able to be immersed in that world again. It was very emotional for me. So I'm going to be placing it in the A tier. I'm not really sure if it should be in the A tier. I think it should, but I was very emotional reading it because I was so happy to be immersed again in Robert Jordan's world and to see these characters brought to light again, and feeling how Rain was dealing with things and seeing Lan being the stoic warrior that he is. And it felt like I was coming back home after 2 months. I mean, it was just 2 months, but still coming back home after reading the series and wanting to be back and having new information and a new material about the world. It was just great. So yeah, I really liked New Spring. For fans that have read all of the books but haven't read New Spring yet, please do, because it's so nostalgic and it's great to be back there with new content basically about the Wheel of Time. And yeah, I'm going to be placing it in the A tier just because it was perfect to save it for last and being able to enter and immerse myself in that world again with characters that I love and will hold in my heart forever. It's a great series. Even if I have a book placed in the D tier, this series is amazing. It's the best series that I've read, and I recommend it to everyone. I've made everyone I know pick up the book. So I'm really hoping that you guys have read the series, and I'm really curious to see what are your thoughts, how you would rank these books, and how you do things differently. And I just really love the Wheel of Time. I'm so happy I picked it up. I'm so happy I got to experience this world and these characters that I so adore right now. And I'm so happy to be making this video because I get to talk about this world again. So if you guys have read the books and you have a sort of tier list in your mind, let me know down below how you would rank them and what are your thoughts and opinions on the books, because I'm super curious to find out. And I hope you had a great time watching this video. I had a great time making it, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!